our footing straight in difficult conversations, and we're joined now for insight on this by Chloe Carmichael, a licensed clinical psychologist, USA Today best-selling author, and the author of an upcoming book called Can I Say That? All right, good to speak with you this morning, Chloe. Good to have you on. And today we're looking at reflective listening, among other techniques. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, thank you so much. The technique is featured in the book, Can I Say That? Which is about, free speech conversations. It can be hard to have those conversations. And so with reflective listening, what we do is, person A says their piece for approximately 1 minute. And then the other person, person B, just simply repeats it back, says, look, if I heard you believe X, Y, and Z. Is that right? How did I get it right? And person A either confirms or clarifies. And then they do it till person B can really just recapitulate person A very nicely. And then they switch roles. And this is really helpful because in psychology, we can have something called hot cognition when we get really upset or defensive, and we actually don't think clearly or even hear as clearly. And we can also have basically emotional stereotypes. So if somebody's talking about a political topic and I have a stereotype of how people who think that way are like, my brain starts taking too many emotional shortcuts, and then I'm not really hearing what they're saying. So the reflective listening technique makes sure that we actually really hear each other instead of talking past one another.
Yeah, it can be quite revealing to get that confirmation back or not, and understand really what took place there in that interchange. Now, you've said reflective.
Yes, it's deceptively simple. It sounds simple, but you'd be surprised how often person A says something and then person B repeats something back, and it's really not what person A said. So it can be a very simple but helpful technique.
And something you can really use to delve deep with then, if there does need some course correction, for example, that could have really led to some other consequences, which is what this all comes down to. What's the outcome here? And you've said that reflective listening is a technique borrowed from couples therapy. Are there any other considerations for communicating with different demographics, young people, the elderly, colleagues?
Yes, definitely. And as you said, it was borrowed from couples therapy, but basically, I think it helps really in any type of heated argument. And really, what it does too is it conveys respect as well. It shows the person that you're really listening, not just to respond, but to make sure that you heard them. Then it's great too because people are not competing for airtime. So across demographics, whether, as you said, you're talking about an elderly person and a young person, or people from actually, frankly, the more disparate the demographics get, the more important it is to make sure that we're really understanding, because we might have different vernaculars or different ways of expressing ourselves. And sometimes too, people feel like they're only half listening because they're looking for their chance to jump in and make sure that they get their airtime. And the reflective listening technique kind of takes that away by providing a structure. It takes the temperature down a notch because everyone knows that they will get a chance to say their piece and that they will be heard.
And I guess it's also something that you could potentially just instigate without announcing it or setting up that reciprocal aspect, and it could still work in a more fluid way.
Yes, I think you've read an advanced copy of my book, because there's actually a whole section on what I call listening resiliently, because it's such an important part of free speech. When I wrote the book, Can I Say That? Why Free Speech Matters and How to Use It Fearlessly, I wanted people to know that it's not just about speaking up, it is also about listening. And so you're absolutely right. If it feels awkward to say, hey, let's do this listening exercise, if you just silently decide that you're going to listen and then repeat back, hey, what I heard you say is X, Y, and Z. Did I get that right? The other person, I can almost guarantee you, is going to be so disarmed that when you finally had the floor to speak, instead of using it to say your piece, you just said, hey, well, I want to make sure I heard you right. Is that correct? And then when they say yes, you can say, okay, thanks. Would you like to hear what I think about the topic? And very few people will say no. So you're absolutely right. You can kind of breadcrumb them into doing the exercise without formally announcing it.
Right, good to know. Now, one common barrier in communication is when the parties themselves are not clear so much on what they think or what they want to communicate, which could lead to reactivity or reticence. And as they say, if you don't know where you're going, you're not going to get there. So what do you suggest in this kind of situation?
Well, actually, I would really applaud people that are willing to acknowledge that maybe there's some nuance and that they don't fully know their position yet. So reflective listening works great with that as well. I mean, you could say something and someone could reflect back. It sounds like you're saying that you see the position from both sides and that, you actually see some gray space in between, and it's hard to land firmly on one particular opinion at this moment. And that's actually a very liberating place to be. So I congratulate you on that awareness. I'm so glad you brought that up because, not having everybody having to be an expert on every topic, right, is one of our difficulties right now. So if people are able to just say, embrace some ambiguity and say, I kind of see both sides of it, I actually think that's a great step forward.
And so much of life right now is so fast paced, and especially when stakes are high, it's often at a time when time is tight and you're trying to communicate and make decisions. What's some aspects that can help make that particularly effective in such a situation?
Sure. So it's a funny one because the reflective listening technique, it sounds as if, oh gee, this is going to take a whole bunch of time. We don't have time to do this exercise. It takes more time to communicate once you've escalated into an argument and people are talking past each other and they're not even really hearing each other. It's like a stitch in time saves nine type of situation. So I would just encourage people that the moment that they feel things are starting to get heated, because of what I mentioned about this hot cognition aspect, that when you realize that that's happening, instead of becoming self-critical, congratulate yourself on the awareness that, you're getting heated, and just say to the other person, even, I feel like we're both, maybe getting a little heated. I am. Let's try this little exercise, from the book, Can I Say That by Dr. Chloe, where I'll say my piece, you reflect it back, and then you say your piece and I'll reflect it back, or maybe even let the other person start by sharing. And believe it or not, it can actually really be a time saver in the long run because people people waste so much time on arguments where they're not even understanding each other.
It seems even suggesting such an exercise could be an offer of goodwill and start to set things straight from the outset. Thank you so much for your time today, Dr. Chloe Carmichael. Great to speak with you. And with that book, Can I Say That, coming out?
Yes, it's at freespeechtoday.com. Thanks again.
Thank you.